Unfortunately, during the live session, technical difficulties meant that Jerry was unable to show his pictures at full size. In order to improve this recording, we have edited in the original pictures onto that video. This will allow you to see those pictures now at full size and better appreciate what Jerry is describing in the video. Hopefully, this compromise won't impair your enjoyment of this excellent and enthralling presentation from Jerry Clifford. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, without further ado then, well, I'll hand over to Jerry and he can talk his way through the slides. Thanks, Jerry.
Okay, thanks, Mick. I'm ever so sorry, everybody. Morning, all. As any of you who know me will know, me and technology are not great friends. And when things go wrong, I really don't know what to do. And for some strange reason, although all the little thumbnails are coming up, they won't come up as a big picture. It just says it's an error and it's Sunday and we're not going to play. So what is Mick has explained, what we're going to do is I'm going to send all these pictures to the Missenden boffins and they're going to connect them to my piffle and waffle, and hopefully between the two of them it'll make some sort of sense. As usual, if you've got any questions, please either feel free to interrupt because it'll give me a chance for a breather, or I think Mick will be running the little typed questions and we can have some of those at the end if there's any I haven't answered as we go through. So please feel free to answer any questions. I'm not quite sure how this is going to work because I'm going to have to talk about pictures that I can barely see, but at least I know what they are and that you can barely see as well, but we'll do our best. What I was going to talk about today really was, well, what I wasn't going to talk about in terms of track planning is things like curve radii and how you fit, your great plan into a given area and so on. It's not that kind of track planning. That's much more a template thing or so on. This is much more a thing about, it's about ideas and inspiration and how you develop a scheme that you want to build. And it seems to me, once you go beyond sort of just nail your track down and run whatever you like, that there are really two types of layout that you can build. One of which is that which is based fairly closely on a particular prototype. And the first slide is if I get my eye, there we are. The first slide is the track plan. If I get that out of the way, then at least you can see the little thing. The first one is the track plan of my large layout at home. This is 20 by 10, roughly. And it's Bath, Queen Square, Green Park, most of you will know it as. And that's very firmly based on a prototype. And the second picture is the inspirational picture, or one of the inspirational pictures that made me choose this model. And it's an aerial photo of the wonderful Green Park, Queen Square station. And the third picture there is just progress. That's about a year ago, and it has progressed a little since then. It goes right round the room, and as you'll see in the next few pictures, the other side of the room, which contains the twin tunnels, Tucking Mill Viaduct, the real Tucking Mill Viaduct on the S&D, not the Tucking Mill we're going to talk about in a bit, and the colliery, my colliery. That side of the room is largely finished, and there's a large fiddle yard as well, which again we've got a picture of later on. But that's one way we can look at things, is to model an actual prototype, and there's a huge amount of satisfaction to be had in that, in terms of research and trying to recreate a particular scene as closely as we can. And it's incredibly rewarding, particularly when pictures or information for things that you've been hunting for ages suddenly crop up. The other approach, as I see it, is to be inspired by a particular scene or a particular field you want to try and recreate, but not necessarily to slavishly copy a particular prototype, but to take inspiration from it and to perhaps lift elements from it and maybe lift elements from more than one area. And that's really what I've done for the majority of my smaller layouts. And the first example of that, and again, I'm just going to do a couple of pictures before I go into detail, is the colliery. Now, many of you will have seen my colliery. It's been referred to as like a cheap suit. It's turned up everywhere. The old Highbury colliery. We did about Kim and I did about 70 shows with it over about a 12-year period from the early 2000s. I think I retired it in about 2014, something like that. And Highbury colliery, and if you see the picture I'm waving over now, the prototype picture, that Highbury colliery was very much based on Camerton New Pit, which is what I wanted was a fairly typical North Somerset colliery, but I didn't really want to pick any particular one. And Highbury, when I built it, was deemed as being on a short twig. You couldn't really call it a branch line. In the Nettlebridge Valley, running from the S&D along the Nettlebridge Valley and joining up with the Great Western. So it had, you know, all these elements in its favour. And Highbury was very much based on that picture of Camerton. I did a slight mirror image, and I lifted other pictures, other buildings from other collieries, but broadly it was that, and I renamed it. Once I retired it in 2014, I didn't really know what to do with it. Kim, because it was the first layout I'd really finished, although I'd built many before that, said, well, we're not getting rid of it, because that was one of my ideas, was to flog it on, as you do. And in the end, what I decided to do was to rebuild it again, but to incorporate it into my home layout, the home layout of Bath. And geographically, it works very well for where the Somerset coalfield arrives. But of course, Camerton is actually a Great Western colliery, and Bath and my stretch is very much Somerset and Dorset. And that picture that I'm waving around over the top of now is a picture of the colliery. Now it's been rebuilt. And you can see you've got a double track main line across the front, there's exchange sidings, and there's the colliery in the background. And for those that know it, it's sort of Withlington-esque is how I would describe it. Withlington Colliery, just north of Radstock, has got that the exchange sidings signal box, but the colliery itself at Withlington is laid out differently. So again, you can see this idea that I've listed elements of various different prototypes and put them together into what I hope is a pleasing, both visually and operationally. And in fact, it has worked very well. So that's the idea. As I say, just to recap that, you can either take a prototype and model it as accurately and slavishly as you possibly can, or you can lift elements of various prototypes and sort of put them together into what is a pleasing way. So it's in essence, it's freelance, but it's very much based on the prototype. And that's the two approaches you can take. And what I want to do now is we're going to have a look at Tucking Mill itself in a bit more detail, because Tucking Mill is very much that sort of freelance approach, but based around the prototype. I mean, Tucking Mill is more freelance than most, because it's something which I think you rarely see these days, although certainly back in the 50s and 60s was much more common, in that it's not just a freelance location, it's actually a freelance railway. Brilliant. Thank you for your forbearance, everybody. Anyway, okay, I'll very quickly run through these. You don't want the talk again, but I'll quickly run through these pictures. This is the home layout. This is Bath here. This is the climb out of Bath going up the bank here. For anybody who knows Bath, the co-op. There's the siding in the brickworks. There's the co-op siding. The Midland dives away and actually goes underneath here, in the Midland storage yard is underneath Coombe Down Tunnel here. The twin tunnels is actually a single tunnel. You enter Devonshire Tunnel and you come out of Coombe Down Tunnel. Sadly, Lincoln Vale, I didn't have room for. We then go over. We come out into Horsecombe Vale, go over Tucking Mill Viaduct. Midford is completely missed out, sadly. We go to double track, and here's the colliery here. where I'm waving my cursor there. If I go to this one, this is one of many inspirational photos I've got. This is, of course, Bath, Queen Square. This one was taken in the early 1920s. Fabulous picture. Let's go to there. That's the layout at home, or one end of it. And then I went on to talk about the other side of the room, which is where the colliery is, and that's the track plan for Oxford Colliery. There we are. And as I said, the colliery was based, or certainly inspired by this picture of Camerton New Pit, which is on the Camerton Limpy Stoke line, made famous, of course, by the Titfield Thunderbolt. And if you compare that with my colliery, then it's broadly, it's a mirror image of this. Camerton is fed from the left, and I've got the colliery being fed from the right. But this idea of the branch, or the main line, passing in front of the colliery is very much what I took for Highbury when I did Highbury Colliery. There you are. Can I get onto that there? Yep, there you go. There's the complete scene. There's the colliery. There you can see the line passing along the front, and over to the right you've got it's what in Somerset they call the batch. It's the spoil heap. It's not much more than a pimple when it comes to actually the scale of spoil heaps. It should be probably 5 or 6 times that size, but it gives an impression. I mean, big spoil heaps had to start as small spoil heaps at once sometime. And this final one, if it works, there you go. That's the colliery now in its original form. That line there, you can see my cursor, was the main line across the front, and the baseboard finished about here. When I rebuilt it, incorporated it into the layout at home, I put another 6 or so inches on the front, and that line across the front then became a couple of exchange sidings, and we've got the double track main line across the front. It goes into the fiddle yard for a hole in the sky over there, and this end goes on to cross Tucker Mill Viaduct and run down to Bath. And that's just a little S&D local, little S&D 044 tank with a horse box and rake of blue coaches. It's 2mm scale, by the way, for those who don't know, which is sort of engage with attitude, I guess. But it's 2mm scale. I think most of you probably know this sort of stuff I do, but that's what that is. So that's where we were. As I say, you've got one half of the big layout at home is very much based on the prototype, and as far as my knowledge and skills and also space will allow, Bath is to be built as accurately as possible. And the other side of the room is a sort of series of cameos, either of actual S&D locations or of scenes that are inspired by S&D locations. And all of them have been truncated and have big chunks missed out, but hopefully give the right impression. So you've got this partly very much prototype based and partly inspired by, but not slavishly copied by the prototype. And that's the two key approaches I would take. So we move on to Tucking Mill. There's the track plan. Many of you will have seen Tucking Mill out on the exhibition circuit. Remember those things, exhibitions? It's as I said, it's not just a fictitious station, but it's a fictitious railway. My North Somerset Light Railway, which is a Colonel Stevens affair in my imagination. The North Somerset Light Railway was a real thing. It just never got built. It was one of the schemes put forward for a line up the Cam Valley. As I say, the Cam Valley was the line, when it was eventually built, was the one used by the Titfield Thunderbolt. And the North Somerset Light was one of the early schemes that was put forward. I've always felt that because the North Somerset Light would have connected the S&D with even more of the collieries, the Great Western quickly jumped in and said, no, I think we'll build that line. We don't want the S&D get any more of the coal traffic than they've already got. So this is very much fictitious, but as I hope you'll see as we go through, it's all based on prototype, not just the location and pictures, but the reality of the history of the area as well. Move on down here. This is just a quick shot of the layout under construction, and I've followed this format for this and for William Smith Wharf, in that we have a picture of the layout underway, and you'll see it's not that big. Other than the big layout at home, all my layouts are roughly the same size. They're 4'6" to 5 feet long, because that's what will fit in the back of the car in one lump when I take it to shows. So they're all designed on that sort of footprint, and it's about 15 inches deep in the middle. The other features that I tend to always have, as well as a high back scene, the back scene is concave, and the front of the layout will be convex. It's just one of those little design features which I like. And also it will be framed as well, so you've got that sort of proscenium arch, very much in the Ian Rice style. I'm a big believer in framing a layout in the way that you display it. And in 2 mil, I think that's particularly important. The models are so small that if you've got any distractions behind the layout, such as operators' bellies or the scruffy back end of the layout behind you at a show, it detracts from the model. You want to focus the viewer's attention in very much on the model.
Jerry?
Yes?
We have a question from Andy Glover on that particular slide.
Right, I'll go back to it.
He's wondering if, when you build your, you make the back and sides removable to ease access during construction. They
are, yes, they always remain removable. Yes, that back scene. I mean, if I can't now, but at some point I have got pictures of that back scene being made, and it's hardboard that I steam and bend over a couple of old paint pots and then clamp whilst it dries out, and keep that shape, and then I build a frame around it, so the whole lot will lift off. So yes, that back scene comes on and off.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay. And that's where Tucky Mill lives at home. The little unlit bit to the right is William Smith's Wharf, which we'll come to shortly. The William Smith's Wharf is all of 2 feet long. You can barely call it a layout. So, anybody who says they haven't got room for a layout, well, there you are. I think you almost certainly have. Anybody who's read Ian Rice's cameo layouts book will have seen a very similar picture to that. But Ian took his picture of that room the day after I decorated it, and there's no books on the shelves. I think there's a couple of paint pots and some dust sheets and so on. I did offer him a better picture once the room had had some stuff put in. It's also not as tidy as that now. There are piles of books on the floor and things now, but as in any office, it sort of develops. But that's how it's displayed at home. And you can see that idea of the picture being framed, so that the attention is focused on what you want the viewer to see, and not sort of what I would call visual noise going on around, which just takes the eye away from it. I've got some more pictures to display later on. As for operating height, it's perfect for adults. I'm stood up. But for small children, you either got to give them a periscope or pick them up. And that's my young grandson helping me operate. I'm just teaching him the ropes there. So, the North Somerset Light Railway. This is a map. You can see this checkered line here. For those who don't know the area, this is the Somerset and Dorset. Here's Bath here. That's the Midland line heading off to Mangotsfield and the north, and also Bristol, of course. That's the Great Western across the top there, and the Great Western here. This is the Cam Valley line, the line that was actually built from Limpy Stoke through to Hallertroe. And as I say, this is the line that the famous Titfield Thunderbolt was filmed on. My little line, the North Somerset Light Railway, essentially follows this exact same route here. The only difference I have is that in the original scheme, the line terminated just beyond Midford at Tucking Mill, just where my cursor is here. What the Great Western did, of course, is they took it on the other side of the valley and it ran through Monkton Combe, which was Titfield in the film, and came onto the line here at Limpy Stoke. So it's that merger of reality and fiction. The Cam Valley was a real line. There were numerous collieries along it, including Camerton itself, Dunkerton, and so on. But it's that merging of reality and fiction. I've taken the real thing and I've altered history. So it already, I think, has that level of believability. Here's Midford as it was in reality. This is the S&D running north to south. There's Midford Viaduct in the centre there. And running diagonally across here is the Great Western's Cam Valley branch, the Camerton Limpy Stoke branch. That's the reality. And just an inspirational picture, because I think it's always worthwhile. This is the junction at Limpy Stoke. Anybody who's driven from Warminster along the A36 into Bath, that large viaduct there is the road viaduct that you go over. This, where you can see, can you see my cursor wibbling around, by the way? Yeah?
Yeah, we can all see that, yeah.
You can, good,
Yeah.
okay. That line you can just see sneaking through the trees there. That's the Cam Valley line. It was actually built on the bed of the old Somerset Coal Canal. That goes under the bridge that you can just see there, and there's a junction there. And that's the Limpy Stoke line over here, Trowbridge to Bath line. And you can see there a very extensive coal train. And when you see the picture blown up, you can see it's a little Buffalo saddle tank on the front that's bringing a coal train off the Camerton branch. So fabulous, fabulous picture. But again, that's the reality. Okay. Now here's where the fiction comes in. This is it's not the biggest picture on your screen, but I apologise for that. But this was in Mike Arlett's book on the railways at Midford, and what he showed in there were the numerous schemes that were put forward to build a line up the Cam Valley in the late 19th and early 20th century. And there were various schemes purported, one of which, the one that really interested me, was this that put forward in 1902, the North Somerset Light Railway. And you can see where my cursor's going here following this line. The line comes under Midford Viaduct, and to the left there, it would have carried on up the Cam Valley in much the way that the real one did, the one that was actually built did. But here, it curves around, following the line of the Somerset Coal Canal, and it ends up just up here at Tucking Mill. And what's really interesting, although I haven't done anything about it yet, is this short, sharp incline, which went from a junction here up to the Midford goods yard up here. And the gradient would have been something like 1 in 25. So I do have visions in the future of little saddle tanks charging this with maybe 3 or 4 wagons in tow, which could be quite fun. So this is the planned but never built element of Tucking Mill. But of course, in my reality, I did build it. And just to give you an idea geographically where you are, this is a lovely picture taken actually during the filming of the Titfield Thunderbolt. This is Thunderbolt here. This is, of course, Liverpool and Manchester's Lion. And this is on the section between Midford and Limpy Stoke, where quite a lot of the filming was done. You'll see where my cursor is in the background, where I'm going side to side. That's Midford Viaduct of the S&D. just there, again, if it was a bigger picture, you'd be able to see it better, but that's Midford Station. And the Somerset and Dorset ran along this ledge through the trees here and over to the right, off to the side. It went over Tucking Mill Viaduct and into Coombe Tunnel and dropped down into Bath. Now, my line, that North Somerset Light, which, as I say, wasn't actually built but was planned, comes under Midford Viaduct in much the same way this line does. But instead of carrying on up the side of the valley here, it swings round, and the Somerset Coal Canal is down here directly below the S&D. And my line would have continued along this through the trees at a lower level and finished Tucking Mill Station, the one I've built, the imaginary one I've built, is over here just in these trees where my cursor is there. So again, I've used the idea of merging reality and fiction. As well as merging elements, the other thing that gets me going for a subject to model is a particular picture that I can often see a picture and I think, oh yes, I want to model that. How can I incorporate that into something? The picture we saw earlier of the colliery at Camerton, which inspired initially Highbury and later Foxcut, was very much one of those pictures. And this one was. I just think this is a lovely scene. This is the mill at Tucking Mill, and it's next to a very attractive little cottage, which is still there. And in the foreground here, this is the Somerset Coal Canal. Coming to very much towards the end of its life, you can see it's just starting to silt up and weeds develop because the railways are steadily taking all the traffic away. But this is the mill, and this is the cottage. And then the bits that I like, when you go out walking with the dog, you go along to the same site, and here we are at Tucking Mill. And that's the cottage that we saw in the previous picture. Still there. There you are. You can see the cottage there. Still got that, probably a copy by now, but still got that lovely little porch on the front. There's the cottage at Tucking Mill. The mill, actual mill next to it, was knocked down in the 1930s. That's no longer there, but the cottage is there. But you can go down, you can really get a feel for the location. And to the right here, the other side of this fence, you can see this footpath. This is on the bed of the old Somerset Coal Canal, and you can actually walk along the former towpath of the canal there, and you can certainly see the cut. Although, other than in the middle of winter, after a lot of rain, there's very rarely any water in it. But again, it's this idea of merging reality and the model. And then we get to the model itself, and there's the mill. I've kind of reversed reality in that I've envisaged that if a station had been built at Tucking Mill, the cottage would have been knocked down because it would have been in the way, but the mill would have remained because the mill provided traffic for the line. Now, the mill itself had various uses over the years. It had been used as a stone cutting mill. It was used as a flock mill, which made stuffing for mattresses and so on. But in later years, it was used as a mill for grinding up fuller's earth into the very fine powder so that it could be shipped away. And in reality, fuller's earth from here was carted up the hill to the little Somerset and Dorset goods yard at Midford, about a mile away. In my reality, of course, the North Somerset Light serves it with a lengthy private siding, and the fuller's earth can be loaded into the vans to be taken away. I don't know how much many of you know about fuller's earth. I didn't know much until I came across this. This is the Fuller's Earthworks at Tucking Mill in Midford. The picture is actually taken from the viaduct, the Somerset and Dorset viaduct, and where you can see my cursor there, that's the mill itself down at Tucking Mill. The cottage is just to the right, out of sight behind those trees. And this is the Fuller's Earthworks. And Fuller's Earth, for those of you who haven't come across it, it's an incredibly absorbent and soft reddish powder that's used in an absolute multitude of uses, from cosmetics through to gas masks, in fine filters. It's used in clothing. in chemical warfare suits. It has a multitude of uses. Cat litter uses fuller's earth for this incredibly absorbent material. And essentially, it was mined up on the hills above Bath. It was actually mined in Bath until the 1980s. And a bit like china clay, it was brought down to these, you can see these big pits down here, these sort of tanks. It's led there in a slurry where it's allowed to settle out. And then the fuller's earth was then put into sheds that had raised metal floors, and a furnace was used to dry them out. The resulting powder was then ground up and shipped out by rail. So we got some traffic, and we got one more picture of the mill here, and this is a load of fuller's earth, which I suspect is heading directly to Bath. This may be, I suspect that's what's going on there. There's the mill, and here's the Somerset Coal Canal. Here we can see doing that lovely S-bend. The Cam Valley, when it was eventually built, the real one, was where my cursor is now. It's on the far side of the valley over there. But as you'll see, in my reality, I've got it coming in on this side of the valley, and they would have cut some of these trees down, and the station would have been here, where my cursor is there. So again, it's that notion of merging reality and fiction. And here's the scene as I envisage it. Here's the canal in the foreground, curling round. It's gradually being, the water level is sinking. It's gradually being taken over by weeds and silt and so on, because there's no traffic anymore. The railway has taken all the traffic. And here's Ducking Mill itself, the little station, nestled underneath the hill. Somerset and Dorset was up in these trees, up on the side of the valley at a higher level, as we saw in the pictures earlier. The buildings you can see here, and the next picture probably shows them even better. The buildings here are very much the Colonel Stevens style of building, these little sort of tin tab buildings. Again, it's one of the reasons I chose them, because I find them very attractive. And this is a typical North Somerset light train. That's a little Hudswell Clark Polly at the front, with two coaches and the passenger brake van at the back, and very ambitious first class section in there. And I always wonder whether that actually denotes first class or the number of passengers on the train. The one, it wouldn't have been very many. There you can see on the back scene up there is a depiction of Tucking Mill Viaduct, the Somerset and Dorset's Tucking Mill Viaduct, which hopefully gives you the location as to where this is. And you can see I've tried to follow the landform of the real location. You've got this wooded hillside dropping down, and here you can see I've got this rock face where it's been cut back to give us a level area on which the station area can be built. And if we go back to that picture, you can see the hillside dropping down here. And what I've done, I've cut it back to give some level ground for the station. So you've got that small rock face there. So although it's completely fiction, it's very much rooted in reality. And I've just got a couple more pictures of the station itself, the area. There you go. There's the mill in the background there. There's the viaduct, the real viaduct. There's the canal doing that shallow S-bend. Again, very much based on reality. I've taken the real location and planted a station in there. I've not just taken some random idea. This is very much rooted in reality, although as I've said, it's entirely fictitious. As I say, there's just a bit more eye candy, a few more shots. This is the little terrier. This is Stephanie. There's also Kimberly, by the way. The three mainstay locos are based are named after my wife and two daughters. And in fact, I've just taken delivery from Bob Jones of Fence Houses, two more nameplates of Archie and Ted, who are my two young grandsons. So at some point, I've got to build another couple of locos to accommodate them. So I'm not entirely sure what they'll be. Here's another picture of a train in Tucking Mill, again with the canal in the foreground, that wooded hillside in the background of Horsecombe Vale looking up towards the S&D, and that's Holly again. And this train is a sort of homage to the Titfield Thunderbolt. That leading coach is the Wisbeach and Upwell coach that was used in the film, although the filmmakers painted it a strange two-tone purple colour, which I'm told looked much better in Technicolor. Or in 2mm it looked rubbish. I tried it; it looked awful. Of course, that coach was smashed up by those wicked Crump brothers, aided by Sid James in the film. So we head on down. More fiction here. This is in the sidings at Tucking Mill. One of the sources of traffic, as well as Fuller's Earth, I've got timber from the nearby woodlands all heading out, and these would head up the valley to the various collieries where they could be turned into pit props and other materials for use underground. But it's another nice sort of traffic. As the real Cam Valley found, passenger traffic was little to non-existent. On the real Cam Valley, the Great Western introduced a passenger service when the line was opened in 1910. It was withdrawn during the First World War as an economy measure, and they reintroduced it again after the First World War. But I think it finished in about 1921 or 22 because there simply wasn't the traffic available to make it worth their while. But the line stayed open as long as the collieries stayed open until the early 50s. And I would envisage that my own fictitious North Somerset light would follow a very similar pattern, in that the Colonel would have tried various schemes to move passengers as cheaply as possible, and probably eventually given up and just been dependent on the quite steady coal traffic which would have gone along the line to keep it going. And once that went, the line would have closed. And this is, yeah, there you go. And that's a final picture. That's pretty much the entire layout, all 4'6" of it. As I say, you've got the mill, the canal, the little Colonel Stevens type station buildings, one engine and 3 or 4 wagons, which is probably fairly representative of a busy time at Tucking Mill. Now, this line here, which goes behind the mill, that shot away up to, when I first built it, it shot away to the world's smallest fiddle yard. It was about 4 inches long and was just a little stub off the side of the baseboard where I could go and shove a couple of stone wagons. The idea was that there were, as in reality, there were a number of stone quarries up here on Coombe Down, and that cut stone was brought down to a transshipment wharf and would be loaded, and yet again another sort of traffic. And bar stone was certainly heavily used all over the country, particularly in London. It was a very good decorative stone, even if it wasn't particularly hard wearing. So initially, it did have this tiny little stub of a fiddle yard. But then I had the idea, well, actually, it would be nice to build a little wharf to bring this traffic in. And that's where William Smith's Wharf comes from. And this is it, all 2 feet of it, 2 foot by about 12 inches. As I said earlier, that nobody can say they haven't got room for a layout. It's tiny. And really, this follows a very similar pattern. I'll just show you. There's the extent of the track plan, if you can call it that. It's a classic Inglenook, really. 2 points, 3 sidings. Here's the wharf, and here's the canal again. Again, largely overgrown. And to follow the pattern of the earlier pictures, here's the layout under construction in the workshop, sat on top of my bench. And actually, you can see in the background there, that's Tucking Mill Viaduct on the home layout. William Smith Wharf, again, followed that exact same pattern that I like to take with layouts, in that I'll lift elements of reality and I'll mix and match them to come up with the kind of scheme that I want to. And this is one of those scenes which I just think is the most delightful picture. This is the canal keeper's cottage at Monkton Combe, and it's interesting in many ways. I mean, it's not just a lovely picture. For anybody who has a bit of an obsession with the Titfield Thunderbolt film, this is the site, where the canal opens out here. This is actually the site of Titfield Station. When the line was built, the canal was filled in, and Titfield Station was built, or not Titfield, so Monkton Combe Station was built here. I mustn't drift into film mode. Monkton Combe Station was built here, which became Titfield in the film. This lovely little occupation bridge here over the canal was knocked down, and that became a level crossing. And to give you an idea, for any of you who know the film, when the village folk are building an engine shed for the loco, and you see them carrying this sort of tin and angle iron shed to place over the line as a home for the engine, they're going over this level crossing, and it's plonked down about here. This cottage is still there, although it has got rather an ugly extension on the front now. But that cottage is still there. And I really liked that scene. So I decided, well, on the wharf, we'll incorporate that scene into the wharf. And here it is. Here's the cottage and the occupation bridge and the canal. And the line, my line appears out of these trees up here. And the wharf itself is just over here. Now, the wharf, I went quite a way north of the real Monkton Combe, because one of my other great loves is the Forest of Dean. And the inspiration for the wharf itself is from here, which is Bixlade. Many of you will know Bixlade Wharf in the Forest of Dean. And rather conveniently, of course, it's a Bath stone wharf. So although it's quite a way north in the forest, it's absolutely appropriate for the sort of thing I was trying to recreate here. Oh, excuse me. So what I attempted to do was to combine the two, the wharf, the canal wharf at Monkton Combe and the cottage, and the stone wharf at Bixlade, and combine the two prototypical scenes to come up with one completely fictitious, very small layout. Now, many of you may wonder, why call it William Smith's Wharf? Well, this is the boy himself. Here he is. That's William Smith. Now, I won't go into any great detail about him. Google him, look him up. Anybody who watched the recent Canal series, which has just been repeated on BBC 4, was it? I can't remember exactly which channel. Thankfully, William Smith did feature quite a lot. William Smith is known as the father of English geology. Strata Smith, he was often referred to as. He was the man who came up with this notion that that rock is laid down in strata, and that you can not only date it by the fossils that you find in it, but if you find very similar fossils in different parts of the country, then almost certainly that rock was laid down at the same sort of time. It's sort of the fundamentals of geology. And he did the most remarkable thing in that he put together a geological map of Britain. He was the first one to do it, and he did it really by going around looking at canal cuts, going down coal mines, anywhere where the strata was exposed, and remarkably putting together a picture of the entire country. And eventually he published a map at great expense. In fact, it bankrupted him and he ended up in debtor's prison. But there's a wonderful biography of him out there, which I would highly recommend you read. He was a very colourful character, son of a blacksmith, was not accepted at all by the Royal Geological Society because he didn't come from the right background, although he did in later years receive recognition and actually got a royal pension for his final years. This is at the Royal Geological Society in London. You can just go on in, and if you ask the nice lady on reception if she'll show you the William Smith map, she presses a little button on the desk and the curtains come back, and you can see this, which is just this remarkable map that he put together. And when you compare it with a modern map, which is, of course, done with all the modern scanning techniques and radar and whatever else they use, it's remarkably accurate. And he did this entire thing by traveling up and down the country on horseback and just looking at canal cuts and so on. They keep the curtains across these maps, by the way, to protect them from the light so they don't fade. But they're wonderful. You go in and just ask them, and they'll show you them, and they are beautiful things in their own right. William Smith was he was one of the chief architects on the Somerset Coal Canal, and he actually owned the mill for a period at Tucking Mill. And he owned a quarry up on Coombe Down, and actually he laid a tramway in from the quarry at Coombe Down to a wharf to load stone onto the canal. For a man who really knew his stuff about rock, unfortunately he bought a rogue quarry, and it didn't make any money. There was a fault running right through it, and the stone was no good, and it was a large part as to why he ended up bankrupt. But again, I'm merging fiction and reality, and in my reality, it was a great success, such that when the North Somerset Light eventually arrived on the scene, and there was enough traffic there to build a short branch or a long siding out to the wharf, so that the stone could be taken out via the railway. Hence William Smith's Wharf. So again, you've got that notion of merging fiction and reality to come up with your scheme. And as I did with Tucking Mill, I've just got a few eye candy pictures, if you like, of Tucking Mill. Of William Smith's Wharf. And here we are. This is Bodmin. This lovely little saddle tank, Fletcher Jennings saddle tank, was built by the fantastic John Greenwood. And you can see here as we see on Tucking Mill, the overgrown canal. There's the canal cottage, and here's the wharf over here. Try not to look too hard at the derrick there, because it's still force-sticked and unfinished. It has been for a couple of years now. Excuse me. And here's how I've tried to blend the two. You've got the wharf and the couple of sidings on a slightly higher level than the cottage and the canal in the foreground. So you've got Somerset here and Gloucestershire and the Forest of Dean up here. And hopefully the two have blended reasonably well. Okay. I've just got a few more things to run through. I know whenever I talk about Tucking Mill and the wharf and anything like that, I put this talk together for the North East Fine Scale Group initially, and they wanted to know about the locos and the stock that run on the line. So I've got a couple of slides just on the locos, really. Here's the small engine shed at Tucking Mill, and that's Kimberley. It's a heavily butchered eco white metal body that I run a saw right down through the middle, because it was very wide, so it would fit an Arnold chassis. So I took a great chunk out of the width and put it on a little scratch built chassis. The castings actually are very nice, even though it's a little bit chunky. Here we see the complete lineup of stuff that usually goes out with it when I take it out those long forgotten shows. Here's Holly, there's Bodmin, there's Kimberly. In the middle of the three at the back is Stephanie. 1667 is actually one of the Bath shunters. It's a little Midland 1F, but I almost always take one or two of my Bath engines out, which I believe have been borrowed by the North Somerset Light. And here we got a little Midland 2F. Again, I always take at least one tender engine out when I go to shows with Tucking Mill, mainly because a tender engine has got far more pickups, and by Sunday afternoon, you're really grateful of that as things start to get grubby. And you'll all know the little blue chap at the front who makes the occasional appearance. That's a scratch-built plastic car body. John Burkitt Smith did the body for his sons when they were young, and he put it on a little N-gauge chassis, and I've just put it on a new 2mm chassis. So it's a 2mm fine scale Thomas. And here's pretty much the same lineup again, but this time at the wharf. And this is one of my more modern ones. That's when I run the colliery in 1970s mode. I got a bit of a thing for industrial engines with chevrons. Don't ask me why. I just have, but that's an austerity that I built. And just to round off the stock, this is something I would dearly love to have running on Tucking Mill. I'm now on its third iteration of a working chassis for it. This picture shows the second iteration. The first one, I managed to squeeze a mechanism into one of the bodies, and they are tiny. These are Ford Model T bodies, and they are tiny. But although it worked, it filled the entire body, and I wasn't happy with the way it looked. The thing with these things, they're like travelling greenhouses, and I wanted that to keep that airy look. So I abandoned that, and I went for this, my second idea, which was to have a powered wagon, which could sit in between the two. And whilst that works very well, it's far too big. It's only a 9-foot wheelbase, 5-plank wagon, but you can see it demonstrates just how small those little Ford rail buses are. And it just looked wrong. I wasn't happy with the look. So I'm desperately trying to come up with a scheme to power these two tiny little things some other way. I haven't done it yet, but I'll get there hopefully. So that's those. Just a few more pictures again that were on the end of this collection. One of the joys of a fictitious line is that you can write the line's entire history, and if you wish, you can build other elements of that line. And the one that's very likely to be built is this, which is what I call Midford South Junction. And if you remember way back in the mists of time, at the start of this this presentation, I showed you a map of the North Somerset Light that was planned, and it included a junction with a steeply graded little spur up to the goods yard at Midford. And I thought this again would make a nice little scheme. So this is a sketch I've done superimposed on top of the OS map, and in reality you can see going across diagonally left to right here the Great Western Cam Valley line, as I say, that was actually built. Running right to left here, you've got the Somerset and Dorset, and what I've done is I've got the Somerset and Dorset on the back of the baseboard here, and running underneath is my North Somerset Light Railway, which I'm curving round much steeper, and I've got a junction here, a very simple junction where it crosses the Midford Road, and that then will climb about 1 in 24, 1 in 25 up and disappear off scene. And this is a scheme which I'm very likely to build because it allows me to run my North Somerset stock. I could also do it as a continuous run because this could easily be done in a loop around here. But it also allows me, if I put a short fiddle yard either end of that, to run at least some of my shorter S&D trains to shuffle backwards and forwards across the back. So that's a scheme that may well get built. And again, it's very much merging fiction and reality. Shake when you've had enough. I've got a couple of pictures here of the fiddle yards that can be used. This is the train table for Tucking Mill itself. This is before Tucking Mill was scenic, actually, is when it was bare boards. And it's at the much missed Camrail show from about, I don't know, 2010, 2011, something like that, probably 10 years ago. And it's what you'd call a train table. It's a complete, you can get an entire train on that. It's actually made with my old record deck, with a piece of ply bolted on the top. It works fantastically. The great thing about record decks is that they've got beautifully smooth bearings topped by a big, usually about 10-inch or an 11-inch disc. So they work ever so well. And there you can spin the entire train. And the location and electrical continuity is simply bolts made up with telescopic tubing. The original on the colliery I did with cassettes, and again, as fits most of my stuff, it's as simple as possible. It's just aluminium angle, and I made up these little sheaves of brass, which are just a bit of folded shim, which again connects the two, which only aligns them but provides electrical continuity as well. And that was again a very simple scheme. And then this is doesn't relate to Tucking Mill at all. This is actually the big home layout, but it again uses that similar scheme. This is a sector plate, and again I've done both alignment and electrical continuity is done with telescopic tubing. Very simple to do, and it works very well. And then we got the final couple of shots. This is again not Tucking Mill, but in terms of layout planning, you need to have a fiddle yard. This is the fiddle yard at home. Only 5 of the 10 tracks are laid as yet, but you can see there's the colliery, and way over in the distance over there is Tucking Mill Viaduct, and off screen to my right on the other side of the room is Bath. And there's the final one of the fiddle yard at home, with the old Myford sat underneath it. On the very end of this presentation, I've got some lockdown pictures, which when I gave the talk to the North East group, they asked to see what we've been building in lockdown, but I won't impose those on you today unless there's any great requests. So I'll finish. There we are. I'll finish with this picture, which isn't of Tucking Mill, but I couldn't find a suitable picture of Tucking Mill. But the way it's displayed, in fact, the curtains across the front and the legs and so on underneath Foxcut are exactly the same as they are on Tucking Mill. And the way it's displayed is broadly the same. And the good-looking one is Kim. We were very lucky to win a cup in, I think it was Basingstoke some years ago, and it was the people coming through the door who voted for their favourite layout as they went round. And when they were leaving, one chap said he was asked which layout he voted for. And he said, I can't remember the name of it, but it was the scruffy bloke and the attractive blonde. And they knew exactly which one it was. So there you are. I'll leave you with that picture of the scuffy bloke and the attractive blonde. And I'll take any questions if anybody's got anything. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Jerry. That was splendid, fascinating, inspirational, and lots of other words I can't think of at the moment.
Late, I think, is one of them.
Jerry, are you painting your own back scenes? Because they really blend in very
Thank
well.
you. Yes, I do. Whilst I did them myself, I was taught how to do it by John Burkitt-Smith, who's absolutely the master of back scenes. Are you an MRJ reader?
Yes.
In one of my issues, he did me an article on painting back scenes. Oh, it would have been 3-4 years ago now. If you go into the MRJ online index, you'll be able to find it.
Okay, yeah, I'll look it up.
But they're all done in acrylics. A very basic palette. And I'm no artist, but I can follow instructions. So yes, I did do them, and they're nothing like as good as John's, but they're acceptable. I'm happy with them. They took a bit of practice, but yeah. So thank you,
Jerry. That looks like it's about 4 foot high in the picture.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on layout display in general, particularly with regard to height? Particularly height.
There's a minefield for you. It's impossible to please everybody. We do take it. I didn't include a picture, but I have got one. We always take a periscope with us. I'm fully aware that having them at that height isn't ideal for those in wheelchairs or for kids. Now, kids can be picked up because, generally speaking, most people stay in front of the layout for a couple of minutes, no more. People in wheelchairs, we offer a periscope, which isn't ideal, but it's hopefully better than not. My own view is that I've got to stand there operating for about 6 hours a day if I'm at a show. So having them at that height gives by far the best view for the majority of people. And if I had to stand operating something that was sort of 3 foot off the ground, by about 11 o'clock in the morning, I'd be crippled up and my back would have gone. So I just couldn't do it. It's a compromise. It's a compromise that's not going to keep everybody happy. I appreciate that. And I'm not sure what the answer is. I'm very much of the view that that's the best height to display it at, because it's the best height for the majority to view it comfortably. But I realise that it's certainly not ideal for the minority of people. But as I say, we take a periscope, so we try and make the best job of it. But it's not perfect. I'm quite happy to accept that. It's far from perfect.
Graham Stacey, you seem to have a question.
Oh, Jerry,
Yeah.
can I come in there?
Yes, please do.
Eventually. I model in 4mm, and you can see some of my stuff behind my head here. But I model Caledonian. They're quite small engines, and I've always believed we've got quite a lot to learn from you 2mm guys about motors and transmissions. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or is that going to be subject of another talk?
No, well, I can. If I go down, that's my lockdown loco I just built. With small locos, in fact, for pretty much all tender locos in 2mm, we put the motor in the tender.
Yeah.
The motor goes in the tender, and there's a flexible drive shaft on UJs through to a gearbox in the loco, which leaves a lot more space in there. So do you go on RM Web at all?
Occasionally. Is this on RM Web, is it?
Well, that one is. What I'm thinking more, if you go on there, there's I know there's another chap doing 4mm. Is it pre-group Caledonian, your stuff?
Yeah.
There's
Jim Watt, I know.
Well, Jim,
he does the 2mm stuff.
That's right. Well, I was going to. Jim's one of the ones I was going to suggest. He's on there as Kaylee Jim,
Yeah.
and he does some beautiful stuff in 2 mil.
Yeah, I've seen some. Well, I do know Jim actually, and I've seen some of his stuff. Yeah,
And there's another chap who's my self-enclosed discipline on RM Web is I don't leave the 2 mil area very often.
right.
But I have got a few other sites that I go to that have been recommended by friends, and one of which is a blog by a chap who, and I can't remember his name now, but he models the Caledonian in 4 mil. So that might be worth, and I know he takes questions, so that one might be one worth picking up. I can't, in all honesty, remember what it's called now. But
No, that's great. I'll have a
he's
look on
built a
the
number
RM web.
of Caledonia locos in 4 mil, so that may be a help for you. Yeah.
Okay, many thanks.
Not at all.
Graham Stacey, you're unmuted. Do you have a question?
I was going to ask about the back scenes, but I think that question's already gone, really. Can I maybe just ask about your approach to baseboard construction? Because I know there's a million variants on that.
In what context?
Well, how do you build your baseboards? What's ply or?
Well, the received wisdom is that you buy the best quality birch ply and all that sort of thing, which I'm sure is very sound practice. I trained as a carpenter, so and shockingly, I make use of whatever I've got.
Sure.
Highbury and Foxcut was built on some 2B1 that came from my mum's airing cupboard. When we put a combi boiler in there for her, there was all this lovely 2B1 and 3B1 slatting that had been there for years. So it was bone dry and really straight, and Foxcut is built on that. Tucking Mill is built on some wonderfully garishly coloured, really high quality plywood. When a late uncle died, and I was helping Mum clear the place out down in Kent, Kim and I stayed down there for the weekend, and there was this lump of utility furniture that was made just after the war, that for some reason they painted a sort of yellow and purple colour, and it was hideous. And I said to Kim, I said, "Oh, we're taking that home." And she said, "What on earth do we want that ugly thing for?" I said, "Well, it's really good quality ply, that." So Tucking Mill baseboards are made from that. So I'm a bit of a cheapskate when it comes to baseboards. I use good quality materials, but don't really stick to any one particular school. I like quite a lot of depth. You can see on the front there, I do like the baseboards to be quite deep, so that any under baseboard gubbins, point motors, electromagnets, and all the rest of it have got a bit of room to breathe, and you're not worried, when you're moving them around, that you're going to smack everything off. And of course, a decent bit of depth does give you a nice, a great deal of rigidity. But it's 6 or 9 mil ply, glued and pinned. Keep it square, keep it flat, and put a few diagonal braces in to make sure it. And only put baseboard where the track's going to go.
Yes, you don't need to do it otherwise.
No, you don't.
Weight down.
No, you don't. Yeah. But also have a scheme in mind before you build your baseboard. Don't just build, this big flat area and then think, right, what do I put on top of that? Because very often you want to go well below the baseboards. In fact, I've got a bit of a thing in all my. I'm whizzing back up the pictures here to see if I've got one that shows it. I don't like all the track being on the same level. All the layouts, even Tucking Mill, the tracks, it may only be 1/8 of an inch or so apart. You can see here, this is the colliery. The main line, that's level, the main line. The line running up here into the exchange sidings rises only about 1/8 of an inch. But that goes up. The sidings themselves, which are behind the signal box there, you can just see the wagons are level. But then the line from here running up to the colliery rises again by about another 1/8 of an inch. And then it rises again to get into the colliery yard by about another 1/8. So there's about a 3/8 difference between those two. It's not much, But visually, I like the way that zigzags from front to back. I think it increases the apparent depth. And you need to incorporate that into your baseboard. So have a think about that when you're building them. But in terms of materials, good quality, stable materials, and there are many different ways it's been done. And if it works, then it's a good way. I wouldn't dictate any one particular way. Other than the only other thing I would say is if it's a portable layout, you want to take it to shows, don't use 4B twice an angle iron. Make it so you can move it, but also make sure there's enough strength because to take up the rigors of taking them to shows.
On your rail car, I had some ideas that one of the Scale Forum sites, the CLAG site in London, I think it is, there's a number of articles there where they use tiny little coreless motors, and they have a direct drive, like a belt drive. And I think it's the Nigel Lawton 009 website, and he uses some kind of basically a belt drive, which acts as a reduction.
I've just bought some bits from Nigel Lawton, actually. I haven't got around to trying it yet, and I've got a little 6mm diameter coreless motor, which will take 12 volts, which I'm going to have a go with. As long as I can get the mechanism below the window line, I'll be happy, but I want to keep that open, airy look. But the idea of having a PMU, a petrol multiple unit that could roll in and out of tucking mill is very appealing.
How about putting a baggage van between the two?
It simply wouldn't have hauled it. There was on the Real Thing, there was a wagon they specifically built to carry luggage between the two vehicles, but it was made from an old plate layers trolley because there wasn't enough power for it to pull anything else. You're talking a small Ford Model T. It still had the gearbox. In fact, it still had the steering column, although they took the steering wheel off. The driver had to sit there with this shaft that pointed directly at his chest, which must have been incredibly dangerous. There's some fantastic stories about those little Ford rail cars. That they were horrendous to drive in, to be a passenger in. Somebody pointed out to me, when you look at pictures of them in operation, all the passengers are in the rear one. There's virtually no passengers in the front one because it stunk of petrol fumes and exhaust fumes. So they all rode in the non-powered one. Usually the driver was on his own in the front one. Any slight gradient or any grease on the rails and they span their hearts out. They weren't wonderful. So the idea that they could pull a wagon just wasn't going to happen. So I'll get there, but I'm not sure how yet.
Can I ask a quick question about the lighting on the layout?
Yeah. What
is it? Can you tell me? Is it LED or?
No, I'm not fond of LEDs for lighting the layout. I find them very. I know you can get all sorts of different strengths and colours and warm ones, but I've not had a lot of joy with them so far. These are undercovered strip lights that you use in a kitchen. Two things I would say. I do like it to be quite bright, but two things I would say is your forward lights. If I can come back down, that one might show it. Can you see this bracket at the end here? And there's one at this end as well, which you can't quite see. But the lights at the front cantilevered out, not by much, only a couple of inches, so that the light is in front of the layout, so that the models aren't backlit. You want to make sure that the light is slightly forward at the front of the layout. And the other thing I would say is that when you're painting the layout, painting scenery or anything like that, paint it under the same light conditions at which it's going to be displayed, because it can really have a quite dramatic effect on the colours. You can paint something on the bench and think, oh, that looks rather good. You put it on the layout, under the layout lighting, and you think, oh my goodness, what happened there? It can have quite a dramatic effect on it. So paint things, or certainly do the final painting and adjustments under the light at which it's going to be displayed. But they're just strip lights I've used. I really should go over to LEDs because they're the way forward, and those old strip lights aren't that easy to get hold of now. But I'm yet to find a combination that I'm happy with. I just find they're quite hard.
Jerry, how do you avoid shadows on the back scene?
Well, plenty of light will help. That'll flood out any light. The chimneys try and have far enough forward so that they don't. So they don't throw a shadow, although sometimes it can't be helped. And very cleverly, this was the John Burkitt Smith's idea here. On the colliery here, you can see this chimney here, we couldn't avoid some shadow. So what he did, and John did this for me, on the back scene there, he painted a hedge line in exactly where the shadow lined up, and we lost it.
Clever, yeah.
But yeah, really, if you can get a light, I'm waving my hands around here, which you can't see. If you can get a light towards the back that shines down the back scene, that'll pretty much flood out any shadow.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but lighting is quite important when it comes to display, I think. Get back into there.
Any further questions from anybody?
Do you, hi Jay, do you by any chance have a picture showing the way you construct the removable part of it, so the back scene and the ends, and the way that joins to the baseboard with the track on, and how you go about designing that part of it?
I have got some pictures. I haven't got them on this computer, but I'm just going to make a note. And what I'll do when I send the pictures through to the Missenden team, I'll include a couple of pictures of the back scene under construction, if you like, and they can perhaps put them up maybe alongside your question or something.
That'd be perfect. The way they mate together, really, and how you go about designing it such that the two, I guess it's two modules effectively. Is it one with the ends and the back scene and one with the track on? Is that the way it's designed?
Yes, pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, design is always rather a strong word for me, because although I sort of advocate thinking everything through. In reality, there's an awful lot of making it up as you go along. But yes, the back scene is done with. You can get quite nice 2mm or 3mm MDF, which is very malleable. You can mold that you can bend that to the shape you want, and you can also then laminate it with a second layer. And glue the two together in the shape you want, and when the glue's gone off, it will then retain that shape. And I'm pretty sure I've got some photos of the back scene in clamps and under construction, so I'll pick out those and I'll add those to the pictures that I send to the team, and hopefully that'll answer some questions. But it's just bent and glued thin MDF and ply.
Sure. It's more that way the back scene module, how that joins onto the track module, the two substructures, how you design them such they join together, so you can
it's just a couple of screws. The back scene and those front wings. Where's my cursor? Here we are. That lighting pelmet across the front is separate piece. That's got a couple of strip lights in there, and you can see there and there. There's a bolt goes down through there which connects that to this pelmet. But the back scene, the two ends, and those two front wings are all one piece. And actually, once the layout's finished, they never come off. They would come off if I took a few screws out. But you can probably see. Can you see? There's a tiny little where my cursor is pointing. That's a screw there. There's one there. There's probably one or two along the side and probably one or two along the back. And that's it. They're just screwed on. There's no sort of quick release fancy mechanism at all.
Okay, thank you.
But I should be able to find some pictures of it with that off. If not for Ducking Mill or for one of them, which shows the idea.
Either of them would be great. Thank you.
Okay, but I'll make a note
Fantastic
of that.
presentation. Thank you, Jerry.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for everybody being so patient with the technical issues we had, but we got there in the end.
Okay, everybody. Well, thanks very much, Jerry. Unfortunately, even though we started late, I'm going to have to close the session down now because I've got a little bit of preparation to do for later on. If anybody has any further questions for Jerry, then you could use the contact form on the Missenden Abbey Railway Modellers website, and someone will respond to the question accordingly.
If there's pictures of any other elements of the construction, if you'd like to leave a message with Mick or the Missenden team, I shall get the pictures up to Mick in the next couple of days, but I can send, if I've got pictures of any relevant parts that people want to see, I can include those in the pictures I send up. So if there's anything you particularly want to see, if I've got pictures, I'll send them.